everyone, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joe, and hello, everyone.
Hello. Well, this evening we're talking about or today, whenever you're watching this, the stages of the writing craft. When is it worth rewriting, and how does the rewriting process work? Because both of us have been going through a few rewrites, and we thought we should talk about that since it's kind of a craft topic today, but also mindset as well. But as ever, before we get into that, we're just going to talk a bit about what's going on. So, Orna, what's going on with Ally?
Ally is gearing up for our 10th anniversary celebrations. I was calling it a 10th birthday, and then an editor kindly pointed out to me, no one gave birth. This is an anniversary. So
Gotta love the editors.
I gotta love an editor. So now it's our anniversary celebrations. So yeah, we're going to be live at London Book Fair on the 6th of April, and then online on the 16th of April at Self-Pub.com. We're doing a mini Self-Pub.com where we bring all the fun of the fair to all our members and followers around the world. So looking forward to that. As part of that, we're about to launch a 10-word story competition, and that'll be good fun. We're looking forward to seeing entries into that, and we will be sending emails and blog posts and everything will go up in the next day or two. So start sharpening your pens and thinking about 10-word stories. We'll have some advice and tips about how to do those, and look forward to lots of entries.
Fantastic. Right. Well, obviously, we're talking about rewriting. I rewrote Stone of Fire, and then I've just also rewritten Cryptobone, my second novel, which has gone to my editor. And I've got one more to go, the first 3 novels that I ever wrote over a decade ago. And we'll talk about why you would rewrite in a minute. I'm also working on my JF Penn website. I reckon like last year we talked about my main website and your website. It's like it's been 9 years since I did my fiction website, and the old theme is coming to the end of its useful life, as in it stopped being supported. So that's like used to call it a burning platform in IT, which was when you can see the end coming and you really have to do something about it. So that's been forced upon me. I've also another kind of burning platform thing for people, Ingram Spark, who are wonderful sponsors. We love Ingram Spark. They are changing their pricing on March the 3rd, which is just as we record this in 2 days' time. And so if it's been a couple of years since you've updated your Ingram Spark print prices, now is a good time, because I went in and discovered that some of my older books, the profit was just tiny because of paper prices and inflation. So that's just a little tip, because this is the Advanced Salon. Those of you who've been publishing a while, go in and check your print prices. I'm also going to do it on KDP print, because I presume the same. I mean, it's still paper, right? Is that something you've heard from other people about?
Oh yes, very much so. Lots of people are getting notes from Ingram actually to say that they've gone into a negative compensation. But the point is that Ingram will only write you when it hits that point, and may not write you about every book. So it's definitely something to check. Paper prices are affecting printing of everything around the world. It's a global issue, and it's not going to go away. In fact, it's going to get worse. So books, I think, they have these hard price points in the shops, particularly, not so much online. But they're going to have to adapt. Print books are going to have to adapt. And of course, the gap now between print and ebook will also widen. So yeah, it makes selling print maybe a little trickier. And it also means it's worth looking at how you are putting the book together, because sometimes a change in the size of your font or the size of the trim size of the book can actually make a book a lot better value. It's worth playing around with that a bit, particularly if you feel you're going way out of the price range for your genre.
There you go. Not a pricing show, but lots of pricing tips today.
Sorry.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, and so what else? What's going on for you personally as Orna Ross?
Oh, me as Orna Ross. Well, writing me is very caught up with nonfiction at the moment because we're updating. Speaking about updating, which we are all of this show in a bit, and we're updating the ally guides at the moment, and that takes some time. But I did get another two of my 12 poems to inspire series out, so that will be 5 now. And so I'm really pleased about that. And then I'm off poetry and over on to fiction. So yeah, I'm also, as you know, exploring NFTs and that fascinating world, the whole fascinating world of premium digital. And so it takes you down many a strange path. And I find I've spent hours looking at something and come back with absolutely no decision made. So
But we're still in the thinking stage, aren't we, around
yes,
NFT?
yes, yes.
Yeah, and I'll
Well,
just direct people to, once this goes out on the audio feed, I'll have a new video up on my show and on my YouTube channel about NFTs for authors, and 6 different ways that they can be used and all this stuff. So that's coming soon, and it's definitely a topic you and I are going to come back to, because we're really looking at this space and thinking about the next decade. So talk about the 20th anniversary of Ally. Things, the business model will look quite different, as it always does. Time marches on and all that. And of course, time marches on this evening. So let's get into our salon.
That's a lovely little sieg there. Very good.
Okay, so our topic for today is stages of the writing craft. When is it worth rewriting? So let's start with a sort of bigger question of, why might we want to rewrite a book? Because does it really matter if books are out of date? Readers understand that books age. And in fact, much writing advice says that you should never go back. You should never revisit old work. You should just write another book, because you'll bring those lessons into the next book. So, Orna, why are you? Tell us what you're rewriting, and also why you want to rewrite it.
Yeah, so I'm rewriting because I wrote a book as a standalone, and realized at one point I thought it was a trilogy, and then I realized it's actually a series. And so the original book that I wrote, I've spent a lot of time working on this. In the background, there's nothing to show for it as yet, except the original book. But the original book now, the end needs to go into the next part of the series, and the beginning needs to go into the earlier part of the series. And so I'm left with this kernel, which is operating quite differently. And also the narrator is featuring in quite a different way in the book. So it's a very practical reason, really. It's called Her Secret Rose, and it's the story of, I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but just it is there's a central love story, WB Yeats, Maud Gonne, and it was pretty much just about that relationship. But it just wouldn't let me go. I didn't really want to rewrite it. I really wanted to move on. I actually had another trilogy that I needed to finish, and it was very pressing, but this kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And so I just found myself working on it all the time. So that's where it's got to now, and it's a much more ambitious project now, and I like that, and I've just decided to go with it. So that's mine. Tell us about yours. It's a bit more
It's
conventional reason to go back, I think.
Well, it's quite different, but I want to just comment on yours. So first of all, I have a Secret Rose, the limited edition you did for the anniversary, which you did a crowdfunder for, and I have it. And this is a limited edition. It's got lovely design and everything. Now you're now deconstructing that and reconstructing something else. So as a reader and a fan of yours, I think, oh, cool, my limited edition is even better because you've changed things in the future. So that's interesting, because as a collector, and of course we'll come back to digital limited editions another time, but I think this collectible idea is so important. And then you also said about ambitious. This is a much bigger, ambitious project. Creative ambition, we just don't have that. And we're going to talk about the stages later. But our creative ambition, we can't do it when we're newer writers. We just can't achieve what we wanted, right? We can't do that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And the other thing that happened here, which is also very relevant for indie authors, I think, is there was a hard deadline. It was the anniversary, Yeats' 150th birth anniversary. And I rushed the project really to meet that deadline, and I suppose it was fine. There's nothing wrong with the book, and in fact your limited edition has that, and it has Yeats' stories in it, so that will always stand as a book in and of itself anyway. It's my own novel part which is getting quite the change. So yeah, I think it was partly because it was it was done in short notice, and partly for all the other reasons that I've decided to do it. It's absolutely the right decision. I have no choice. I really don't. Yeah.
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 So for me, it's interesting. You also said it kept coming up. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm rewriting those first three novels. They were the first three novels I ever wrote. They were called Pentecost, Prophecy, and Exodus back in 2009 to 2011-ish. No, 2012. I wrote those novels and then rebranded, and I wrote them under Joanna Penn. So since they came out originally, they're now Stone of Fire, Crypt of Bone, Ark of Blood. I'm JF Penn for my fiction author, and a lot has changed. So in my business, in my craft, and there are now 12 books in the Arcane series. So what happened over Christmas was I was doing revisiting ads, and I calculated my read through, and I discovered that read through from book 4 is really, really good. I just have to get people to book 4. So I was like, okay, well, if I rewrite books 1 to 3 at this point, that might actually financially improve my read through. And then I also realized I'd been putting this off. I didn't want to reread my old work. I really didn't. I was like petrified. And then when I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, I wish I'd done this earlier. But like you said, this is not, the books are still good. If you look at my reviews, they're still great. They, 4.1 star average or whatever. Stone of Fire is also my perma-free on all stores. So it's a very important marketing asset for me and for bringing people into JF Penn, and my craft is better. So by rewriting those 3 books, I'm kind of giving my brand a bit of a repaint, proving to myself that I have some writing craft these days, and also hopefully improving read through, which will mean my ads can generate more income. So I guess all of that is important. But any comments on that, or why? Let's talk about nonfiction as well.
Yes, exactly, and poetry indeed, because I also, as I said, we're updating the ally books, and I think this is something that happens with nonfiction in lots of, particularly how-to nonfiction in a techie sort of area like ours. It's inevitable that you're going to have to do updates, which sometimes turn into, complete and utter new books, new ISBNs, new everything, because you go back in, you think nothing's changed. You go, oh my God, really? You look at it and you say, 2 years ago, this is what we were thinking, really? It's fascinating. And you and I are both fairly ahead of the curve, but it just moves so quickly. So that's, I think, a reason that nonfiction writers are going to come up against this very often. I also have experience of redoing 2 poetry books where I just gathered a lot more poems, and so I was able to take out ones that I had put in that were kind of relevant to the theme, but not so much, and ones that were much more on the nose, and it really improved the sales. It was worth doing. So yeah, I think we'll be talking about the measure and how you know whether it's worthwhile or not. But it so much depends, doesn't it, on your reason for doing it, and you can have so many different reasons to actually go in there.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the big question then, because I've had a few comments. I did my own show, like an in-depth show on my rewrites last week, and I had a comment from someone that said, "Well, why didn't you edit your book in the first place?" and it made me kind of facepalm, because for that first novel, I used a lot of editors. I used like 3 different editors on that first novel. I've used multiple editors across the 3 novels and more over the years. I actually, one of those went to an agent, and there were things that I've worked on those books over the years. But her point kind of suggested to me that it was a very simple question of just fixing typos. And the bigger question is, does that mean we shouldn't publish our early work? Should we wait and wait and wait and edit forever?
Yeah, well, I think your questioner misunderstands the difference between an edit and an addition. So they are two different things, and so I definitely don't think we should wait and wait and wait and edit and edit and edit. Absolutely not. There are people who say, look, indies, write 3 books in your series before you put them out there, because you will learn a lot in the doing of that. You can go back and get number 1 a little bit more shiny before you put it out there. And also from marketing perspective, really, it's going to be very tough to market book 1 and book 2 anyway. So why not wait until you have 3? It's a way to do things, but I just don't think there is. I think at least 85 to 90% of independent authors are not going to do that. I think
Just
it's
not
just
patient
asking.
enough. Like, no.
Sorry.
Not patient enough to wait.
No, it's asking an awful lot of somebody, because the whole thing of writing a book and getting your first draft done, your final draft done, and then going through the whole publishing process and then saying, okay, I'll put that aside now and I'll work on number 2. I just don't think anybody has that kind of, and I don't think it matters. I think a lot of that is because traditionally it was so difficult to republish. And so once it was published, it was out there, it was gone forever. It's a very different sort of world. So then you were kind of judged from that moment onwards, kind of thing. Whereas publication is part of your creative process, it's part of your growth, and you can go back there and you can change. Doesn't mean you should or you have to, but because you can, I think, off you go, kind of thing.
Yeah, and talking of limited editions, if anyone has a copy of Pentecost by Joanna Penn, which is what's so funny is we can't
I
get rid of
do.
what we
In
can't
print,
yeah,
yes.
in print, because we can remove our ebooks, we can remove our audiobooks, but we cannot get rid of the secondhand book market. So if any single print edition went out into the world, then it won't disappear off your profile, which is kind of hilarious. Or Goodreads, this is still kind of sitting on Goodreads. So yeah, we'll talk about the practical side of republishing in a minute. But yeah, the point is, you have to know your personality. I was never going to wait. But what is wonderful about being an indie is you can just upload things. And of course, the version of Stone of Fire that just got uploaded was like the 15th version, but it was a big new edition. And what I would say, in the if you have got Stone of Fire, anyone, check the copyright years, because I think it's the 4th year, like 2022 is the latest year, the latest edition. But of course, we all do typos, we do back matter, we do these other things over time. But let's talk about the sort of, again, a bigger question. At what stage in your writing journey are you ready to re-edit a book? And this is so tough because obviously it's individual. But I don't think I could have done this edit 5 years ago. Maybe I feel like a lot has changed. I mean, I've written like 17 novels or something now, but I feel like a lot of stuff has solidified in the last few years that have really helped me, and that doing it earlier wouldn't have helped. But what do you think about when are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, there's no rule. I think for sure it varies, but I think you need to have a long gap of learning in between. Writing is a craft and a skill that's learned slowly. It's very, you take leaps and bounds at the beginning and then you kind of come to a shelf. And we'll be talking about stages in a minute, but that's pretty typical. And then you plateau and leap, and that seems to be the way that most writers proceed. And it slows down more as you get, the more advanced you get, the more that progression kind of eases off into a plateau. So I don't think there's any point at all. It's not going to be anything more than minor edits if you go in there too soon. The other thing I would say, if it's not coming up for you, forget about it, and I think that's when it does actually happen for most writers, is when it just kind of won't leave you alone. It keeps coming up for whatever reason. And you might not even be sure what exactly your reason is. But if it's bugging you consistently over a period of time, then it's coming up for a reason. Things don't come up like that for no reason. So I would say trust that. Don't act on the first impulse, but if it keeps coming up again and again for you, then there's probably something there. And you might find when you go in to do that rewrite that actually something new comes out of it, a bit like me with my one book that's turned into lots of books. Yeah.
That tends to happen with you.
Yes, it does.
But I want to, in terms of, I mean, obviously we're talking about non-fiction as well, but I just want to refer to Dean Wesley Smith, who has a book called Stages of a Fiction Writer, and I found that very useful. It's Dean is kind of famous for tough love, and that book is certainly full of tough love, because you think, oh, of course, I'm a stage 3 or whatever, and then you read it and go, oh, okay, I've got a bit to learn. But let's talk about that, because you've put together 4 stages. So give us a bit of an overview, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, this is sort of roughly based on the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition, which is a kind of an academic thing that applies to any skill. So no matter what skill you're learning, there are various stages. Dreyfus has 5 stages. I think there are kind of 4 stages in my experience of watching many, many writers over the years, both as a writing teacher and now, observing lots of indie authors through Ally. And so you've got the complete beginner, and at that point you kind of don't have a clue. Your skill level is really, really low, and you're listening to all the rules, and you're reading books about craft and how to do it and everything, but you haven't integrated that learning, because it's a very complex skill, writing, and so it takes time, and so you don't understand the stages of the writing process either. So you're mixing up your editing and your writing, and just generally in a mess. And you're kind of in awe. You're looking at it and saying, how does anybody ever become a good writer? Such a gap between where I am and where I want to be. Am I ever going to be able to cross that kind of thing? Then if you keep at it, just keep writing at that point. That's all you can do. Just keep writing, keep reading the craft books, listening to the advice, not acting on everything, taking it in, let it kind of wash over you. But the main thing, keep writing and keep reading. Then you will become what's kind of called the emerging writer. And so you're beyond the beginner stage. You're still relying a bit on the rules and the maxims and advice of others, but you've got more of a context because you've done some writing. So for example, if you said to a beginner writer, look at this passage here, you're telling, you're not showing people what to do. They wouldn't understand what you're even talking about, whereas the emerging writer kind of gets it, but maybe doesn't always see when they're doing it. So at this point, the challenge or the downside, the thing to watch out for, is overwhelm, because as you take in more and more and more advice and you're listening to more and more and more people, it can all just get a little bit confusing. So you stick with that, you keep reading, you keep writing, and eventually you develop competency. And at that point, you're kind of getting comfortable with your own process and with the writing process itself and with the practices that work for you and the things that don't work for you. And you now know if somebody comes up with a piece of advice, you now know that's not me, that kind of thing. And this space is brilliant because you very often begin to experience flow and you feel great, when it's going well, but you can also find it very frustrating when resistances come up because you thought you were over that, or when things go wrong and you can't quite find out why or fix it. In this stage, you can become a bit obsessive, maybe a bit driven or anxious, and here is where you see comparisonitis begins to lift its ugly head, because you start comparing yourself to other writers. You've done lots of years, maybe at this point you've worked really hard, and you're kind of looking at people that seem to be successful, in inverted commas, and wondering why you're not there. And then you keep on writing, you keep on reading, and eventually you get to be a master. And a master writer operates by intuition, doesn't really know much about rules, would say there are no rules, would possibly not be able to explain how they had achieved a certain effect. They're thinking about the reader, they're thinking about how they're going to kind of get them where they want them, make them cry, make them laugh. It all becomes about the reader then, more and less about thinking about what you're doing yourself. So less attention. You might enjoy playing with sentences or playing with a structure or plot, but it's all done with a sort of a design. The other thing about the master writers, they usually have about 12 projects lined up that they're looking forward to doing, and they're dying to get to the end of this one so that they can get on to the next one. Yeah.
Oh no, that's a good overview. Just coming back on a few things. My personal trainer said this the other day. We were talking about lifting years. So I do lifting weights, and he's a decade younger than me, but he has 25 years on me in terms of lifting. And it's a kind of simplified version, but it's the same with this writing, in that it depends on the domain that you're doing. So you can be a competent or a master writer in one area. Let's say, I have a friend who's very, very good in a sort of, I'll just say non-fiction. I don't want to get too specific, but in a very non-fiction sense. And he's very frustrated because he's trying to write a novel, and it's like he's gone back to the beginner because there's so many different things. Or, if I if I wanted to get into poetry, I would jump back to the beginning again. Now, I don't think that's true for every single different thing, or screenwriting, like you and I have both tried screenwriting, and it's like it's very annoying because you think, but I can do that other kind, why can't I do this kind? So that's something to think about. It's really also let's say domain specific, not quite genre specific, but it's domain specific, right? It really is.
That's interesting. Also, in your point, to your point about the lifting years, young writers get a lot of attention, and there are even prizes and everything for young writers. But actually, you could be a young writer because you didn't start till you were 75, and now you're only 76. And so, you're a young writer under those conditions. It's the number of years you've spent writing. Obviously, life experience will stand to you, particularly in writing fiction, but it's not enough. You won't have the craft skills. So that's another point around.
And I'd also say it's not just time elapsed. So some people might spend a decade writing one book, whereas the person who might have done a book a year, and again, it's so difficult, you can't put rules on it, but it's actual active time writing as opposed to just thinking about writing or all of those types of things. So, and again, it's hard not to compare yourself to others, but I also feel that you can dip in and out of master. So I definitely feel now, I think it's okay to say, I think I'm a competent writer. And I kind of realized this with doing my rewrites. I'm like, do you know what? I can do this. I know how to do this now. And it's made me happy because I have a draft of how to write a novel. And now I feel like I can actually go forward and write that because I understand what I know. I know that I know this. But then occasionally I feel like I might dip into a master writer moment. And then I'm like, oh, this is it. This is what it feels like. And then 10 minutes later, you're kind of back in something else. Or you might have managed to, you talked about the rethinking about the reader and essentially trying to manipulate the reader experience. And there were points when I was doing that rewrite in Stone of Fire, and I was like, oh, I can see what I meant as that early writer. I can see what I wanted to get the reader to think, but I put it in a very odd way, and I was trying to get it out of my head, but I wasn't thinking about it from the reader's head. Or for example, I found I cut out quite a lot of words, and one of the things I did was I kept telling each character what was going on, so there was a lot of repetition in the book. But I didn't need to, but it was the reader who needed to know the information. I could have just recapped it, but in one line, but I kept telling over and over and over. And that of course has a massive impact on pacing and boredom in the reader. But I was thinking, well, that character doesn't know that, so I have to explain it all over again. Stuff like that gives you an insight into where your brain was at the beginning.
Fascinating. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so those are some of the stages, and of course everything blurs, and like we said, you move up and down. But how can we actually move stages? Because I mean, this is the big deal. How do we get better? And we're assuming, and we are talking about craft here, but this does affect everything in your author business, because when it comes down to it, the books, the poems, whatever, they are our written body of work, and they also drive our income, and they attract our readership. They're our voice. There's so many reasons we want to be better. So, Orna, what we've talked a little bit, I guess, about time, but what else can we do to improve?
Yeah, I think it's about consciously practicing, realizing that we are committing to improving. And so the main thing is practice. And by that, I mean your core practice, obviously, which is turning up and doing your writing, working on whatever project you're working on. But also it can help to do practices like free writing, or even crosswords and Wordle and Scrabble and things like that. Words are your medium, and the more you play with them, the more you actually become better at manipulating them and using them to effect. So I think also practices that kind of stretch our imagination and help us to trust our intuition are really important for writers. So trusting things like meditation, daydreaming, mulling over things, and perhaps consciously taking your writing into your sleep. So there are people who, and I'm one of them, who will pose my writing problem to myself before I go to sleep. And sometimes I've been known to write it on a piece of paper and put it under the pillow. And then sleep is, subconscious
I haven't
mind
done
is,
this.
yeah, try it. It's honestly, it's great, especially if you're kind of stuck. Because the subconscious mind is where the depth and the creativity comes from, I think. And recognizing that and strengthening the subconscious, I think, helps us to get from one stage to another quicker than just doing the front brain work. And I think also you're going to make mistakes. And I mean, you and I did a whole show about all our mistakes and things we got wrong over the years and how helpful that can be. I think using failure as sort of data to improve. So if you get a bad review, actually, taking it in at the level of, okay, what are they saying about it? Can I learn from that? Yes or no? Put it aside. And other things that go wrong, seeing it as not allowing it to derail you, but taking it in and absorbing it.
Mm.
I think also a really important thing is to read at a higher level than you write. So just lightly, so you still enjoy it, but read people who are skilled and look at how they do what they do. In writing classes, I used to recommend reading twice. Read the book for pleasure first, and then go back and read it as a writer and look at how they got their effects. I think that is really important. And the other thing, I think the most important thing of all, is to recognize what it is to be a writer, to set up your life around that, to give up the things you have to give up if you're going to do this, to have the life habits that actually sustain you as a creative and help you to do what you're doing. These are the things that keep you there over the long term, because it is a long-term endeavor.
Mm. Yeah, and I recommend, I've got a quote on my wall from Stephen Pressfield from Turning Pro. The book Turning Pro, I read every couple of years, and I remember reading it back when I was like, I need to just take this seriously. And the whole point is it becomes simple. Everything becomes much more simple when you turn pro. That doesn't mean you go full time as a writer. It means you make a decision that your writing is professional and you are going to commit to that, which means obviously you're going to give up other things. And again, craft. I mean, I particularly like short classes, and I learned like James Patterson's masterclass, I think, really is a masterclass. Whatever you think of James Patterson's writing as his books, the guy is a story genius, and that masterclass really helped me. And I've taken, again, to mention Dean Wesley Smith, he has courses on very specific things, so his class on depth really helped me with point of view. I really just hadn't understood point of view. I'd be like, Morgan said this, or it just ways that when Morgan thought this, whereas I didn't need to write Morgan thought, because I could just write that because I was actually in her point of view. So there are ways that I take these very specific courses now. The other thing I want to recommend is volunteering. If you're part of a genre, this is fiction particularly, but if you're part of a genre organization, so I'm part of International Thriller Writers, Horror Writers Association, you can volunteer to be a judge in the early stages of the book awards. So they always need early stage judges to kind of work through the massive amount of books that have been submitted. So over the last pretty much 5-6 years, I've been alternately one of these early stage judges. And I have read so many books in these genres. And what's so crazy is now, I think this is what agents must feel like as well, is I can read a page and I know whether or not that's going to go any further. And very often I will be able to, it all goes forward into the process. I'm never a top judge, people. Nobody send me anything. But it's like, I can tell. And I've learned so much from being part of that process, and that picking up books that I would never have picked up otherwise, and just learning from that. And I know you do a lot of judging too. Does it help you with insights?
Yes, I have done in the past, and I worked as literary agent in the past as well. But I think specifically in your genre is a great tip,
Mm.
because if you're reading more widely across the range, you don't get the same level of feedback. But I think you would agree. I think every writer agrees that improvement is mostly a matter of writing.
Yeah,
There is no
absolutely.
shortcut. Just turn up and do the dang thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, what are we discovering as we rewrite? So, I guess I've mentioned a few things there. I have deepened. I mean, if you read Pentecost or Stone of Fire, you don't need to read it again. The story's the same, the characters are the same. But what I did was deepen the character and the emotion and the point of view in the scenes. I also leaned into my voice. I did not know what my voice was in those early books, and I've expanded on themes that now I know I can lean into. So for me, that is good versus evil. Like, I've gone much like Crypt of Bone, which was already pretty evil, is now like, I'm like, oh, this is great, this is so much fun. So that was good. I've also improved my pacing, as I mentioned, and I have got rid of 17,000 words. Which
Wow.
well, yeah. And also, what's so interesting is I didn't count them as I was doing it. All I did was, when the final book, when I was like, this is it, this is done, and I worked with an editor and everything, I'm like, this is it. It was 55,000, which is actually the length of what I write now as a full length book. So I feel like I've done exactly the right thing. I got rid of like extensive research info dumps, and now I know how to include my research much more into my writing. Yeah, and then of course there's a lot more detail of craft, like passive voice to more active. So Morgan was walking to Morgan walked, which turns 3 words into 2 words. So if you do that throughout a manuscript, you can get rid of a lot of words. Now, it's not about getting rid of words for the sake of it. It's just that, that happened through improvement. So I've definitely discovered a lot of stuff there. What about you?
Yeah, I think because my rewrite's a bit more just about the structure. I'm not, learning as much of that, and I'm also not, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, I'm deepening, so it's more
Mm.
nebulous than what you're doing. You're actually looking at a specific book and approaching that. I'm still building out a bit, so I think it's a little bit different. So yeah, I think deepening is what I would talk about, but the voice is definitely changing and has become much stronger, and the narrator themselves has become a character, and her backstory is intertwined with the character. So it's all very structural, really. It's all about extra plots and just kind of more stuff.
Yeah, more stuff.
More stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just talk about we're just aware of time here. Let's talk about the practicalities of rewriting.
Yes.
For me, I use Vellum to do my formatting, and as I said, I've updated back matter and things over time. So I just took my current or my old version of Vellum, and then you can export in RTF format, which rich text format, which I then imported into a Scrivener file. And I like writing in Scrivener. So basically, I then created a new folder in my drive, 2022 edition, copied everything in there. And remember, copying everything, people. So you've got backups of all your old stuff. I didn't change the old stuff. I copied it and backed it up and then changed the copies. And then I used Pro Writing Aid, which I find is super helpful, because if you open each chapter, you can open Scrivener within Pro Writing Aid and just do a chapter at a time. And they have like a score. So the scores were often 60 to 70%, and I took them all up to over 90%. So I did it's too much to go into all the detail of that, but Pro Writing Aid is just brilliant. I think if I had that back then, I would have been able to learn this stuff so much more quickly, because every time I go in there, I learn something. Actually, that's probably a good tip. Put your
Yes.
own manuscript into Pro Writing Aid and see what it comes up, right? You think so too?
I use pro writing aid on pretty much everything. I do think when you get into more creative writing, it picks up
Yeah.
on stuff that, you want to leave there, but it's always good to be asked and to be questioned. So yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so just to finish my process then, so I
Mm.
did the edits there. I also rearranged things and basically did quite a big job between Scrivener and Pro Writing Aid. Then I printed the whole manuscript out and hand edited it. put the changes back into Scrivener, printed it again, hand edited it again. This was a pretty long, this took me about 5 weeks. And then I sent it to my editor and then did the changes. And now it is out in the new edition, which I'm so happy about. And I just finished Crypt of Bone, which is here. So that's going too. And it's also, I'm working with a new editor, and I wanted to mention that because I think it's important. Over time, we all change editors. We all are writing changes. Editors move on, and we need different people at different stages. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. And as I said, I've got Arc of Blood by the end of March, and then so in April I should be now ready to start new projects, please, but also to see if it makes a difference.
Fantastic. So maybe just finish with a few kind of practical tips to say to people, you will need, if you do this sort of massive edition, you do need to update your copyright page. And you also need to let readers know that you have a new edition, and so that people, not readers, but also librarians, booksellers, everybody knows that this is a new edition of this book. You need a new ISBN for your print edition, and we would recommend also for your ebook edition for the same reason, so that if a library wants to order your ebook or whatever, they can actually get the one, the updated one and not the earlier one.
I just want to add on that though.
Yes, what else?
This is a problem because if you update your ebook ISBN and your print ISBNs, you would lose your reviews unless you manage to get Amazon to move them over, and that is a job in itself. So personally, I did do new print ISBNs, but I just uploaded my files again. Also, when I published what was Pentecost in 2009, I didn't use ISBNs, so there never has been an ISBN on that book. But yeah, I would really caution on you have to decide, is this really super, like if you have terrible reviews, then of course you want to do the ebook with new ISBNs. But yeah, that's my caveat on ebook ISBNs. If you do a new one, you might struggle to get those reviews, whereas print is quite normal.
Print is okay, but I think Amazon's pretty good. I mean, when you ask, they generally tend to bring the reviews over for a new edition. It's
personally, I wouldn't. I mean, I have so many reviews on that book. I'm like, I am not doing anything to jeopardize it.
Okay, but yeah,
so we disagree on that, which is amazing. Like disagreeing on things. So just on KDP Print, you can unlink those old editions and then delete them, and then link a new edition, which is really good. What do you think about audio?
Yeah, and you mean in terms of going back in now and you have to redo your audio? Yeah, it's not a problem that I've had because I've only literally started doing audiobooks, so I hadn't done an audiobook on Her Secret Rose, so it doesn't arise for me, and we're only just putting the Ally books into audio as well. So I don't know. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm at the moment, I'm not going to do 3 full-length novels in audio right now. I mean, financially, that's quite a big commitment.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think about it and make a decision once I see what happens. So we should just, we should also, people always say, oh, don't readers get really angry? No, they don't. Most don't even notice that you've changed because they've either read it or they haven't or whatever. So most people don't even notice. I put on mine previously published as Pentecost, that was years ago, and then the copyright date or whatever, and you can see on Amazon and all the stores, you see a date when it's published, so that will also help. But I don't think readers care, but we should just revisit what we talked about, measuring success, and how do you know that the rewrite has been worth it? So what do you think on that?
I think it's a good idea, once you know that you are going to do it, that you're very clear in your mind why you're doing it, and whether it's for you or whether it's for somebody else, whether it's for financial reason, whether it's because you can't bear the idea that early work is out there in the world, whatever the reason is, getting very clear about what it is, or you may have more than one reason, and then afterwards looking and seeing, did it actually achieve anything? Because the last thing you want to do is start, say, re-editing all your old work, and it actually is just a big time waste.
Yeah.
So if you don't, and it could be, I think it's something not to do lightly. I think so. You need a sense of why you're, like anything we do, and we need to know why are we doing it, how are we going to get there, and then how are we going to measure whether it worked or it didn't work. And I certainly wouldn't do another one until you had gone through that entire cycle and seen the outcome and measured the result. And yeah, I look forward to hearing about yours, because it'll be quite identifiable. You've
Yes.
got a very specific kind of creative
Yeah.
intention there. Yeah.
Yes, well, the creative intent, and but as I said, I'm only doing the first three. Sometimes I think, oh, I should look at book 4, book 5, and I'm like, no, because the reason was that the first three, once people are into book 4, if I can get people into the 3, then book 4, the read through stays much higher, and also those 3 are linked, and they're a box set, the 3 of them, so they need to be in harmony and all of that. So yeah, what I'll basically do is from April-ish, mid-April, I'll start putting ads again on my perma free book. And then I guess what I'll do is later on in the year, I'll report back on how things have improved. And look, to be honest, even if they don't improve read through and sales, I've learned a lot from revisiting my writer self of over a decade ago. And as I said, I'm going to get on with how to write a novel.
That in itself is brilliant, because that one has been stalled. So if it's going to push you over that hurdle, it was worth it for that alone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So we're out of time. Next month, we'll be on the second Tuesday of the month, because we'll be at London Book Fair the week before. And then we will be reflecting on our what we learned at the book fair and the 10 years of the Alliance. And yeah, it's going to be a big week. So I guess we hope to see some of you at London Book Fair. Is there anything else you want to say on that, Orna?
No, just yes, we hope as many of you as possible will come. Obviously, we know that lots of you can't, but we will, as I said, be bringing all the fun of the fair will be online on the 16th, which I think is just after our chat on the Tuesday. So the weekend after that, we'll be bringing
Not
it.
all the fun of the fair. There's a
Not all the fun, all the indie self-publishing related fun of the fair. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I guess thanks for joining us today, this evening, wherever you are in the world, and happy writing.
And happy publishing. Bye
We'll see you
bye.
next time. Bye.